Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar on skills-based hiring. We will be getting started soon. We're just giving people a couple of minutes to sign in. And while you're waiting, feel free to scan the code here on the screen to follow us on LinkedIn. That way you can stay up to date with our latest webinars like this one, blog articles, product updates, and all those good things. Hello to everybody joining us. We'll be getting started very soon. Feel free to say hello in the chat and tell us where you're joining from. Hello, lovely to have you. We will be getting started in just a few seconds. Hello to Canada, Germany, Stockholm, Miami, NYC. Hello, everybody. Berlin. Okay, well, let's get started. Hello, Angie, Emily, and Amanda. And hello to everyone in the audience joining us today. I am your host. My name is Natalie, and I'm part of the marketing team here at CoderPad. Thank you again for taking the time to join us as we talk about skills-based hiring. My hope is that you'll leave this webinar with a better understanding of what skills-based hiring is, why it matters, and how you can approach it. But before we dive in, I wanted to quickly share some practical information. Oh dear. Sorry about that. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce my colleague Alice, or CoderPad, as you see her here. She will be working behind the scenes, making sure that everything is running smoothly. So if you need help with anything at all, you can reach out to her in the chat. Secondly, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and you will receive the recording in the next few days. Finally, there will be time for a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions for our expert panelists, please submit them in the Q&A tab. You can do so at any time throughout the webinar. We'll be collecting them and we'll do our best to answer them all. After this quick introduction, we'll meet our wonderful panelists. Amanda will then walk us through the why, what, how of skills-based hiring. Emily and Angie will then share their perspective and their experience on a couple of key discussion points before we move on to a live Q&A session. So that's more than enough from me. So let me introduce you to our pros. I am joined today by Angie Albertson, Emily Aldridge, and Amanda Richardson. Panelists, do you think you could tell us a little bit about yourselves? Can we start with Angie, then Emily, and then Amanda?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Good morning and afternoon for folks that are like Pacific and all the way to East Coast time. I'm Angie. I'm located in Portland, Oregon. And my professional background is HR and recruiting. I've been recruiting for about 6 years now. Current role is a senior technical recruiter at Machinify, working with a lot of AI and machine learning type technology for healthcare. Gosh, and fun fact, I have swam with an alligator in a cenote before on purpose.
Oh,
I didn't I didn't think we were going to encounter it, but we did. And that was a crazy experience. I have it on camera.
Wow.
Nice to meet you all.
Fearless. Thank you, Angie.
Thanks, Angie. Hi, everybody. My name is Emily. Welcome. I live in Leipzig, Germany, and I recruit for Emnify, which is a Series B IoT tech company based in Berlin. Device connectivity and SaaS platform combined. Shout out to the TA team at Emnify. I think you're on today. I'm originally from the US. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I moved here from Portland, Oregon. So Angie and I share that connection today. It's part of my fun fact, I guess. My background is in RPO, outsource recruiting, and 2 years at Emnify, all go-to-market commercial recruitment for sales, marketing, customer success, and beyond. Fun fact, I don't have a degree. I never graduated from college. Hopefully I don't completely lose credibility in your eyes. Of course, we can check our audience on their biases with a statement like that. So I've had to heavily rely on my own skills for years in the workplace, and I'm lucky to have landed some cool opportunities. Obviously, I'm super grateful for that, despite not having pedigree. So I can deeply identify with today's topic, which makes me very excited. So thank you, Natalie, CoderPad, everybody for setting this up. I'm super happy to be here.
Thank you so much. We're very happy to have you here.
And hi, I'm Amanda. I'm the CEO of CoderPad. For those who may not have heard yet, CoderPad is the leading platform for assessing and interviewing technical talent. So we work with companies around the globe. I am based in San Francisco, but currently in France today, Montpellier, France. So lovely to be joining. And I guess, I don't know if this is a fun fact, this is a sad fact, but something we can get into later. I, despite having the degree, have been very biased against for both my gender as well as for being pregnant. And so skills-based hiring is near and dear to my heart and what we do at CoderPad, primarily just to fix all the broken problems there are around hiring, which is what I get fired up around HR tech. So that's why I'm here today and excited to have you guys. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I am now going to pass the mic back over to Amanda, who's going to take us through skills-based hiring, why it matters, the advantages, how you can overcome obstacles and implement skills-based hiring at your organization. So it's going to be a short presentation, and I'm sure it will give us plenty of food for thought. So make sure to take note of your questions or submit them as we go. Our panel will then address them in the second part of this webinar. So Amanda, take it away. Let's talk about skills-based hiring.
All right, let me share my screen. Am I showing through okay? Did you do that well? Okay, great. Well, I guess I mentioned at the top a little bit about why I get fired up on skills-based hiring. And I've really devoted the past several years to working on this. I guess what I want to share with you today is a little bit of background on where we are, how we got here, and some pieces of advice that I'd love to discuss the practical realities and talk to all of the experts, both those in the audience, as well as hearing from Emily and Angie on what's possible and what can be done. So it seems silly, but I feel as though we have to state that hiring based on logos on resumes or CVs, if you will, makes no sense. Yet that is actually how most hiring seems to be done, whether the logo is an employer or a university. As anybody who has hired a recent college graduate probably understands, even graduates admit they're not prepared for a job. So when you're setting a degree requirement as part of a job, only 13% of them actually have the skills they need for that role. And so you're just creating a proxy that isn't real. More than half of college grads, myself included, end up working in an entirely different field from what they studied. And we see this all the time with software engineers, which is where CoderPad concentrates, as almost 60% of engineers have no computer science degree. Yet we continue to see employers who say, oh, I'm hiring for an engineer. Step one, you need to have a bachelor's degree in computer science. So what are the consequences of that? Well, this is primarily US data. I'll own that up front, but it reflects a lot of what we see definitely in Western and broader Europe, as well as most of North America. In the US, 79% of job postings require a college degree, yet only a third of Americans actually have a degree. So out of the gate, you've eliminated 2/3 of the potential population for your jobs. What's interesting about that, or crazier about that fact, is when you actually narrow that to middle management jobs, and this was a study done by Harvard a couple of years ago, and they looked at jobs specifically targeting middle management, middle skilled roles, middle career positions. 67% of these job postings asked for a bachelor's degree, yet only 16% of the people in the roles actually held the degree, which makes sense given that most Americans don't actually have a college degree. Yet they've created this standard for these roles and expectations for recruiting that don't reflect the population in the role today. So this is the case for skills-based hiring. Aside from improving some of your sourcing challenges, and for all those who say, I don't have enough candidates, yet maybe have unrealistic logo expectations that you're searching for, there are other benefits. You have 82% of employers will report a faster time to hire. You'll see better performance of those candidates on the job when you focus on skills-based hiring. So if you actually recruit and interview based on skills rather than resumes, we see that's 5 times more predictive for job performance and have a much higher retention rate. And so employees without a college degree actually stay at their jobs 39% longer than those with a college degree. So really focusing on skills and getting away from these proxy measures that we believe are important is one way to both free up sourcing, improve your time to hire, and create better retention. So it seems obvious. And in fact, I have a case study. So Ripple is a customer of ours that we've worked with, very much love the Ripple team. They ran, their head of talent acquisition ran what I'll call an experiment, but I think was an inadvertent situation with pushback from some hiring managers. So there were a collection of candidates for development roles who were, known, had worked with someone in the past. They were great culture fits. They were going to be super excellent candidates. We don't need to do a technical assessment for them. Let's just hire them. They're great. So that was one cohort of hires. And then there was another cohort of hires that maybe no one had worked with in the past, or they ran through the more formalized process, I'll say, where they actually did a technical evaluation. So dividing these two populations. And they actually looked at a year later what was happening with the two groups. And those who had not had a technical evaluation, despite being vouched for by everybody else, were actually much more likely to be managed out, which is fancy American way of saying you're going to be fired. And so it was just another example of a time where you can have people who are focused on assessing for skills versus people who have resumes, I've worked for you in the past, and who actually performs better on the job. It seems obvious, but somehow skills-based hiring is not actually the most common practice. Another fun fact to share with the crowd. So I often get the question of like, wow, skills-based hiring is so new, it seems hard to adopt. But actually, skills-based hiring is how hiring was done up until maybe 50 or 60 years ago in the United States. So if you think 100 years ago, which I was not alive then, despite what my children think, 100 years ago, there was no college degree proliferation, and it was the Industrial Revolution. Things were changing quickly. New job categories were being created. All of your hiring and assessment was really based on your skills. And then they would spend time working on apprenticeships. And this continued through both world wars, where you had a lack of labor. Women were being brought into the workforce. And so you really were hiring based on skills. But somewhere along the lines, maybe 50 years ago, the world shifted, and all of a sudden college degrees became the norm. And so as college degrees became the expectations for jobs and for new hires, we created almost like a skills gap, we called it, being like, we need all these people, but they don't have these resumes. And we also have degree inflation. And so I think it's on this group of people actually to re-educate everybody on how skills-based hiring can be done and what changes we can bring about. So the necessity comes from the fact that roles are continuing to change. The World Economic Forum notes that 1 in 5 jobs are going to be eliminated in the next 5 years, which is scary. But the good news is there are just as many new jobs being created. We see this at CoderPad. Prompt engineering is a role that really helps with machine learning and tuning algorithms. This wasn't even a thing 2 years ago, and yet there are 4,000 jobs posted for this today. So we're continuing to see the evolution of jobs, but if we keep focusing on what role did you have, where did you work, and what degree did you have, we're never going to be able to keep up with the rate of change. The rate of change is slow, so I can make my case, yet we've only seen a 3% reduction in the number of jobs who require a bachelor's degree over the past 5 years. And it's only been 1%, less than 1% in engineering degrees, which again is crazy because most engineers don't actually have a computer science degree. So what's going on? I have 3 hypotheses. We'll talk about this in a minute. But one of them is hiring manager resistance. The second one is I think too many people are leaning on referral programs. And 3, you don't have standardized interviewing processes. On the hiring manager front, even though companies want to reduce their job posting requirements and they want to take degrees off, 53% of hiring managers still require a degree or credential, and ultimately they are the ones approving the final job description. So it's on us to educate hiring managers about this gap. The second challenge, I believe, to skills-based hiring is your employee referral program. Everybody thinks they're great. They're such a great source of candidates, but studies have shown there's a ton of bias in employee referral programs. White men receive 40% of referrals, even when normalized for their role in the labor market. And then this probably doesn't surprise a large group of the audience. Women are less likely to get referred, and particularly women of color are 35% less likely to receive a referral, even when normalized for their population in the labor market. There's just a ton of bias in employee referrals, which continues to create problems in terms of how we're doing our hiring, how we're doing our sourcing to really focus on skills-based hiring. And then finally, this is an oldie but a goodie, but Google did the research. I think this is almost 10 years ago now, but they looked at what happened in the interview process that was a predictor of employee performance. Overwhelmingly, skills-based testing or work samples were the best predictor of employee performance on the job, had the highest correlation with being a star performer. The second biggest predictor was structured interviews. So having consistent, clear questions, a rubric with which you're getting those answers and assessing candidates was also a strong predictor. The lowest predictor is what probably all of your hiring managers are doing in an interview right now. Unstructured interviews. Hey, I saw you worked at blah, blah, blah. Tell me about that job. How was it? And so having no lack of consistency, no lack of structure, no lack of focus on skills in your interview process is actually one of the biggest draws on employee performance. So what can you do? This is what we're here to talk about. My pitch is to, 1, train your managers. It's really a mindset shift. There's education required. There's talking to different hiring managers and really sharing the data. The second is thinking about skills all the way through your process, from the job postings you're creating to how you're assessing candidates to how you're interviewing, and really focusing on panels and ultimately performance measurement. 3, investing in tooling to make this happen. CoderPad is one of many companies who cares passionately about this, but there are many choices. Like, please focus on the tools that really fix and focus on skills throughout your hiring process. By reducing the amount of sourcing you need to do, you can create budget. By increasing your employee retention, you can create budget. And then finally, I think committing to 1 or 2 roles to get started is the best strategy, and then figuring out how to scale it out from there. So I close with a case study. JPMorgan Chase, which is a large US-based bank, has been working on skills-based hiring for several years now. They do annual reports on it. It's a fascinating read. Maybe if you're a nerd like me, but hopefully based on being on this call, you're an HR nerd like me. And so they really studied what they had a skills gap in their organization and realized they couldn't fill positions fast enough for what they needed. So they eliminated degree requirements from 75% of their job postings. They actually created a coding academy to teach people with the raw skills how to code so they could get them into their technical talent pipeline. They created a 4-year apprenticeship program for those out of high school. Again, skipping that college step, getting away from that degree, but teaching them how to do the jobs and build the skills to be a good fit for the organization. And they mapped all their roles against skills, from what are the collection of skills for this job, what are the collection of skills for this job, and that got eliminated required experience levels as well as credentials to really create job classes and hire against that. And so, look, 2 and 3 sound expensive, and I love coding, but we're not creating a code academy at CoderPad. But I assure you that 1 and 4 are both possible and can be done by your company. They're a much lighter lift and can have a huge impact on focusing on skills-based hiring. So That's my pitch. And I look forward to a good discussion.
All right. Thank you so much, Amanda. I think that really tees up our discussion here, and I'm very excited to dig into everything you've just talked about. Thank you to everyone in the audience who's been sending in their questions. You can continue to do so. Before we get to your questions, I wanted to further discuss a couple of things that Amanda mentioned. So Angie and Emily, I'm going to turn to you. I wanted to know if you could share an example, maybe a concrete real life example of a time where you experienced or witnessed this mismatch between pedigree, so logos, degrees, etc., and performance on the job.
Yeah, Emily, do you want me to go
Yeah,
first?
please kick it off. I'd love it.
Okay. First thing that comes to mind is, I think historically I've either, like, especially throughout my like school tenure, have been told like if you don't have a degree, there's going to be like this cap on your career. And I see this mismatch now that I'm a recruiter, mostly when individuals want to go from an IC or individual contributor to like a management role. Which is crazy, where I've seen organizations bring in new management into an organization rather than like they even have like a lead role, within whatever department that is. And instead of taking that individual, investing in someone that they already know the skills of to promote into management, they might be biased of like, we want someone with a business management degree or just a degree in general. Then they bring individuals in from outside of the company. A lot of times it might not work out, right? The chemistry might have already been there with whoever the lead was. But I've seen it a lot with like individual contributors trying to expand their career into management. I have another example there, but I'll let Emily go. She has something more to add here.
That's such a good perspective. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. Super relevant, right? And yeah, for transitions within the team. So yeah, just bringing it from the commercial perspective. Obviously, I'm not on the tech side, I'm on the commercial side. So I would like to add that as a caveat. We took a look at our sales teams to understand what skills a strong professional has, right? Like many times we discovered our own team didn't have the degree or the industry experience that one might assume is needed with a complex IoT connectivity solution such as ours. And we've hired people from the industry who did not perform well too. We had to identify why didn't they perform well, what skills were missing, and so wrestling with these topics, right? So team benchmarking was a great solution for us, like taking a look at a team member, sitting with them as they go through an assessment tool and asking them like, do you think that this is quality, these questions, and then creating that what good looks like, right, within the team. So yes, absolutely. The expectation that someone from the industry, is the only person for the position, I think is misleading. So yeah, we can look at the data and definitely we can help our hiring managers understand how to expand the pool just based on skills alone.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, definitely being able to sort of map the skills of your internal team is going to help you. I mean, the hiring manager is not the only one who's going to be able to help you to sort of define that, what good looks like, what great looks like, what bad looks like, but the rest of the team and looking at what skills they have, I think that's really good advice. Angie, did you want to come back to the other example you had, or do you mind if I go to the next question?
One really quickly for logos, right? I
Go
think
for
we
it.
talked about degrees, but logos, one that comes to mind is especially managers in tech that had been in tech for a while. They have all these relationships. I'm forgetting what the specific bias is called, but it's basically kind of like-minded type bias where it's, oh, they see this logo on someone's resume and it's like they don't even like bother to go through the resume because they're like, oh, this person's going to be good. Like, let's get them into the process. or, I know like these top 3 companies, my past colleagues, used to work there, just source through those 3
Mm,
companies. Of course, candidate pool being very small and again, being very biased to a very small group of candidates.
I think, yeah, I see in the chat the halo effect or the horn effect. But yeah, exactly. It's
Yes,
just sort of
thank you.
mirroring yourself and unconsciously that, yeah, makes you want to trust that person. Um, so I also wanted to, so we've sort of touched on hiring manager requirements. Amanda was talking about sort of that resistance from hiring managers. And I was wondering if you've ever been faced with resistance or like unrealistic expectations or requirements from hiring managers and how you handled those situations. Emily, do you want to? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I can take it if that works. Yeah, so a situation for us, we discovered because we're hiring across several different markets, which means different languages. And so many times, when you're hiring, a hiring manager is in Germany and their team is in Latin America, the hiring manager might not necessarily speak the language that's needed to sell, for instance, or to come alongside a customer in that particular space. So yeah, there have been situations where we thought really need native speakers.
Mhm.
But then we discovered, depending on the role and the skills needed to win, that no, we could actually get by with B2 to C1, but how do you test that, right? So lucky for us, we've been using tooling for that. And then of course, very specific questions that can be asked. Informed questions on applications are great too. If you have an honest applicant, they're going to tell you because you're going to tell them, hey, you're going to be interviewed in this particular language.
Mm.
But on the flip side, conversely, what if you need to be able to sell into a specific region and you need those native skills to do it? There's going to be a subset of skills, right? Reading the room, active listening, communication. So yeah, the language component was a big one for us. And you can state these things on your CV and your resume, and two, a lot of this stuff is arbitrary. Like if I might think someone from the US is fluent, but then I have a conversation and I'm curious, are they really an active listener? Are they a good
Mm.
communicator? Like these are things that could potentially have bias, right? Depending on my level of English, my quality of English skills. So yeah, I find that to be a really interesting topic that was relevant for us.
Absolutely, thank you. And we've had that experience. I mean, obviously, so CodaPad is um, primarily so is in Europe, primarily in France, and then in North America. So obviously, we've been recruiting across different languages as well. And yeah, we've come across that where we thought it was sort of this absolute non-negotiable, and then actually, it's all about like communication and being able to make yourself understood. And maybe you don't need that; it doesn't need to be your first language. Um, thank you for sharing that. Angie, did you have any experience you wanted to share?
Yeah, I would say I'm very passionate about coaching hiring managers and just interviewers through just better practices, standardization. One that comes to mind here when it comes to like unrealistic expectations or requirements is, again, when a hiring manager is wanting to bring in a candidate from specific organizations with additional requirements like a degree and then X amount of years of management skills, say if it's like an engineering manager role. And they're very adamant about this, right?
Mm.
Typically, to kind of like change that mindset, I really love to lead with data points. So I'll say, okay, like I'll give some suggestions, I'll go into my sourcing, especially faced with the hiring manager that's very tailored to a specific hiring method. And I'll probably spend like 10 minutes with them reviewing resumes that I found, kind of omitting like the whole degree portion, but just kind of going through the skills and credentials that they have. I actually found like 4 or 5 individuals that were a great fit for the role. Hiring manager seemed very pleased with it, and then I let them know like, hey, just to let you know, like, seems like you're excited, but these individuals don't actually have degrees. So with that, you know,
Oh.
it kind of like opens up their mindset, right? Rather than just telling them like, no, we're not going to do this. This is what we're going to do. You know, it definitely changed their mindset on those hard requirements. Just theoretical knowledge from, you know, when whatever someone is learning from school, not to discredit it at all, but it doesn't necessarily translate into those practical
Mm,
skills that we might be looking for.
absolutely. Thank you. Um, right. So we mentioned that although skills-based hiring can seem daunting or it can seem like a lot, that you can start small. So I wanted to know what you would recommend as like a first step, something small that you can get started with. Emily.
Just unmuting slowly. Yes. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, I just want to mention so many of the data points that were brought up today by Amanda. That's a great place to start. This is fantastic. Resources like this, you can carry this on over to the hiring manager, and I will be for sure, right? Because this is still kind of new momentum for us. We have a nice environment for that at Emnify, hypergrowth. And I loved Angie's approach, that idea of removing the degree information when you're presenting those skills, submitting a candidate over. But yeah, I'll just kind of highlight what I mentioned before about benchmarking within your existing team with your top performers. Take a look at that and ask them, like, what does it take to really perform well in your position? What do you feel like your team is missing? That's the other thing, is the skill gap aspect as well. And then, yeah, kicking it off with some structure, right? One or two positions, really breaking down what good looks like. And then it's more than just the test, the assessment tooling, right? Like we talked about, like it's also really specific, focused interview questions, and then identifying like what we really need to hear. Yeah. So, and reliable tooling is like, of course, that's a big one. I'll re-highlight that. But I was trying to think if there's anything else from my notes. I think that's it from me.
And I think I'd add, so you were saying like the different resources that are out there. And I know we've had Matthias on a couple of webinars. I know you work with Matthias at Emnify, and he shares a lot on LinkedIn, a lot of different resources. He's kind of shares his analysis and comments on them. And so yeah, I would shout out to Matthias Schmeisser. And if you
Yes.
can look him up on LinkedIn, I recommend following him.
He's
Um,
such an, like, he's a 7 days a week resource, by the way. You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, our fearless leader, Matthias Schmeiser at Emnify, is amazing. He's such a proponent for this. And I love that we're getting to try it, right, in our environment for sure, with an expert in the house. So yeah, he's a wonderful follow for those who aren't.
Thank you. Angie, did you have any thoughts?
I had something to add to this. I'm actually really interested in hearing what Amanda might think of this, where I'm seeing, which is, I feel like, a great shift of job descriptions where instead of requiring just a degree, they will start adding like, the specific degree plus like 2 or 3 years of experience, and then like a lengthier time of experience. Or Amanda, if you just prefer like the degree not be there, but just like understanding, I guess, where your hiring manager is coming from when they're giving you the requirements, asking, why certain criteria is a must have rather than a nice to have. Okay, once you understand that, what happens if we change it and, change some requirements to nice to haves? I really love to coach them on competencies, kind of like still skill-based hiring, right? What are our top 3 to 5 before strategizing like what type of assessments or tests that we're going to use, or if you're just like starting with a blank slate and they don't even know what they want to have on their job description, again, going back to like those 5 or 3 to 5, competencies first to kind of tailor those bullet points of requirements, like what skills are required. But Amanda, if you don't mind sharing, like I'm really interested in like what you think about, that shift in like degree plus some experience or like X amount of experience.
I mean, I love it because I've seen, you know, on like a personal level, my husband never went to college and has been working in his job and his career for over 25 years. And people be like, you don't have a degree. And he's like, are you kidding me? You don't remember anything you did in college. So it's like totally irrelevant. And so giving people a way to understand the number of years of experience or the level you're looking for, I think is a great change. I mean, I would just get rid of the degree altogether. Maybe just speaking for myself, but that wasn't time that really was invested in learning much, other than like some social activities, but also like, I just feel like, and I see this with new hires, so many people when they join a company as like a new hire out of college have so much to learn. So it feels almost like giving a lot of credit for college can sometimes be misplaced trust. I'm not discrediting college degrees. I have many degrees, like I get it. But I do think we should just calibrate on how valuable that is. So I love the idea of giving like the trade-off and even talking about, I've seen like one of the mistakes that I've learned time and time again, and I still learn, is like, oh, you were a manager of this for a year and a manager of this for a year and a manager of this for the year. So you clearly have 3 years of management experience. But maybe one of the reasons you kept changing jobs is because you actually weren't good at it. And so I've, in my mind, accumulated 3 years of experience as a manager, but you're actually just proven 3 times you're a terrible manager and that's not the right fit for you. I mean, I should try to think of a more positive spin, but I see it more on like the negative mistakes, right? Like where you have this bias of like, clearly you're going to be amazing. And so, yeah, I think detailing for helping the hiring manager, and like this really is our role on the people and talent teams to like help articulate like what does someone with senior experience as a manager look like versus maybe mid-level versus junior experience. Like how are you handling your one-on-ones, how are you advocating within the company, or whatever those skills are. But I love any shift that gets away from, you know, did you go to Stanford, did you go to Cal, and did you work at Google? There's so much of that just creates more bias.
And I think having that conversation with hiring managers, I mean, you're asking them why, there's genuine interest, you want to understand, but it's also sort of challenging them to give you an answer, because I think sometimes you fall into that trap of like, I'm not going to ask too many questions because it's going to make me look like I don't understand, or it's going to take up their time to try and explain to me, and they're just going to be like, oh, well, obviously I need this for this reason. When actually, when you ask the question, they're like, uh, why do we need that? I don't know. Well, maybe it would be nice to have, but maybe we don't actually need that. So just asking that question, I think, kind of challenges them to have a think about it. I am going to go, unless there's anything that the 3 of you want to share on what we've already discussed. I'm going to go to questions from the audience. Does that sound good for everybody?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So we have a question, this one's specifically for Angie. In your experience, how do you advocate for candidates without a cookie cutter background to executives and hiring managers? I love that. I love that phrasing.
Who was that sent by? Well, for me, like it really starts with my recruiter screen and not just going through what's on their resume, but really pulling out like real life examples of what they've done. So for me, whether or not like I'm always advocating for my candidates. I will say that if I want them to meet with the hiring manager, I think I've built enough trust where, you know, rather than them just looking through the resume, I go through my summary of these are, you know, the key skill sets that this individual has just based on our conversation. You know, this is why I think they would be a good fit for this role that we're hiring for. So just really getting to know the talent that you're recruiting, and getting just like real life examples of what they've done and also what they're looking to do in their next job.
I guess that gives you kind of a tailored, the way that you present the candidates is not just sort of sending through a CV. It's you're going to sort of tailor that to the hiring manager and highlight what you know they'll be interested to know.
Yeah, sometimes I really hate, like sometimes I don't even send the resume. unless they
Like,
ask
I don't
for
have
it,
one.
because they're gonna see it like once they talk to them, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, don't worry about the resume. I've spent 30 minutes with this individual. These are the
Just
things I
listen to me.
know. I've highlighted the things that I feel like you would care about.
Mm,
Because I don't think even those that I mean, I went to college, like no one teaches you how to write a resume,
mm,
um, typically. So sometimes there's really great talent out there that unfortunately write really bad
mm.
resumes. Um, sometimes I try to coach on that too. But yeah, just really understanding and getting to know the individual, their skill set just by conversation, and also understanding their motive for
Mhm.
their next role.
Have
Thank
either of you guys, sorry, have either of you guys experimented with resume free or like blind interviews?
you.
My very first job, which is crazy, boutique, like little firm, very small, electrical manufacturing industry, and it was cold calling. So I literally didn't have a resume to go off of. These individuals were more like blue collar individuals.
Yeah.
I find their number and would like create a resume for them. So that was actually a bit of a transition when I went into technical like staffing, and all we were doing, I felt like, was reading through LinkedIn or
Mm,
someone's resume.
Yeah, I feel like I can identify with that coming from RPO and healthcare in the US for
Mhm.
sure. We had a lot of hiring fairs where we would be sitting in front of people and there wasn't enough time to go through. I think that's another thing, right? Time issues as well. This can solve that for hiring managers or hiring teams. But yeah, I mean, the idea of removing all of what we think we know about somebody before we've had a conversation with them, and then we see how it works, we see how it rolls, we see how they perform in the moment. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm having a look at the questions. So, okay, so there's a question about referrals. So I know this person was listening to your presentation, Amanda. So the question is, how can you safeguard referrals? So this person says, I don't want to refuse referrals, but how can you accept
Hmm.
referrals without introducing a lot of bias? I don't know who
I,
has some thoughts
yeah,
on
I can jump in and then I'd love to hear what you guys are doing with referrals these days. Yes, people are going to refer people. I get it. I think the most important lesson I have learned over and over and over again is run them through the consistent process. And
that. Hmm.
um, even as someone who talks about this in CoderPad, like I remember a year ago, we had a recruiting process we were running, and there was a candidate who had worked with two people and was like super great and was at the last rounds. We were like, no. Let's really pause and make them do what we call a test drive, or was kind of like the active sales presentation. And he totally fell on his face and like, thank goodness we had paused, but had all those pieces of like a referral and vouched for him and a competitive offer and all the things.
Hmm.
So I think my best advice for referrals is just understand you probably have a little bit of bias in your sourcing, which is fine. There's bias in every process. You just got to understand what it is, and then make sure that you run all the way through the process, even if people internally are screaming about it, which was absolutely the case in this situation. But lesson learned.
Yeah, I think that's where like the importance of having that sort of structured interview
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
that's where that's going to come in extra handy. Angie, did you want to add something? I saw you
I
unmute.
a little bit of a devil's advocate on like, I actually do like the referrals of just, I think that individual is someone that's like, okay, they already know someone from the team and they might be, if they are a fit, the retention rate is typically a little bit higher from
Mm.
referrals. However, paired with the right like skills-based hiring, competency-based hiring, where you are putting that individual through the hiring process as if they were any other candidates. We don't really share much at all with like the referral person, just so there's not a lot of like back
Mm,
Oh, that's a
information
great idea.
going
Yeah.
back. Um,
because I think
so
as the person who has referred somebody, you're going to be like, so how's it going? So
they're
where
almost like
what stage are they
entitled
at?
to like know what is
Mm,
going on. And
yeah.
you really shouldn't and don't have to share much.
Mm, that's good advice. Let's see. Do we have another question here? Wow, this is somebody who is also listening to the presentation. You mentioned that employees without college degrees stay at jobs 39% longer than those with them. Why do you think this is? So the fact that
The cynic
employees
in me?
without college degrees are staying longer.
Because everyone else is recruiting based on needing a college degree, and so they can't get another job. Is that terrible? I don't know. It's a good question. I can go back and read the article from the source and see if there was a why, but that's like my slightly cynical off the cuff answer is it's tougher to get a job when you don't have a college degree because of all the bias in the hiring process. I don't know. Emily, Angie, do you have better guesses? Have you seen something similar at your companies?
Yeah,
I feel like there's a notion in the US about this whole foot in the door aspect of having that degree, right? Like that you will have worked an internship or you have done a mentorship program or you have a network. There's the credibility there, right? Yeah, Angie, yeah, feel free to weigh in, especially as it relates to tech.
Yeah, I'm still like trying to figure this out at Machinify where I work because I've tested it out, like individuals that don't have that computer science degree, they
Mhm.
tend to not do as well on our technical assessment. But then I'm like, is our technical assessment like tailored to the type, like
Mm.
those types of questions tailored to individuals that, sat in the seat, went through a
Mm.
university setting, what is it? So I'm still like experimenting there on, what is it about, the computer science degree that tends to make someone do well in our technical assessment? Like, is it really those foundational principles where it's like the complexity of what they're coding here is like it's necessary?
Mm.
Or, that's kind of just like my thought that's where
Mhm.
my mind went when the question came up here.
And
But
does that
also,
reflect on the job, I guess? Like, are they doing better in the assessments and then also doing better on the job? Or is
yeah,
it they're doing
where's
well
the
in that assessment
correlation?
process, but but not
Yeah.
necessarily once they're in the job?
Right. But I'm very curious, like 10 years
Mhm.
from now, like what a college degree, 4-year college degree is going to signify. Like what is,
Mm.
because again, someone going, like putting myself through school, also working 2 jobs at the same time, like 10 years from now, am I going to say like, oh my gosh, I didn't have to go do that. Like I didn't have to have sleepless nights studying for school, thinking I wasn't going to get a job if I didn't get a degree.
Yeah, I think I think I saw a question about this as well, like the value of degrees. Um, but I wanted to ask this question from, I actually have the name here from Manya. So some of these questions are anonymous and some of them aren't. So thank you very much for your question, Manya. So she or he is asking how skills-based hiring is different to performance-based hiring, sort of that comparison between the two.
I would say making some assumptions about how performance-based hiring is done or what
Mm.
exactly the definition is there. But my hypothesis is that performance-based hiring is like I achieved as a sales rep 110% of my quota 4 quarters in a row or whatever it is,
Mhm.
right? Whereas skills-based hiring is I have either good discovery processes or strong sales acumen or strong negotiating skills. I think they are probably highly correlated, but I don't think it's 100% overlap. I have definitely seen salespeople who maybe have been behind a hot product and have sold have very good performance, but maybe a little light on skills. And I've also seen, frankly, the opposite of someone who's an incredibly good seller, but is selling a bad product at a bad time in the market or whatever the case may be. And so I think they're similar, but not the same would be
Mhm.
my guess.
Totally. I would just add to that, like with the questions that you're asking in the interview, or even within the assessment tooling, there might be performance-based questions like how much revenue did you bring in? This is just related to sales off the cuff of this. But then also there's a skill-based question like, How do you handle the worst day in sales? What happens when you lose a deal? And then you find out, do they have the grit, and what's their process? Do they give up? Do they have this, it's sort of an intrinsic motivation to keep going? Do they have the skills to continue succeeding toward the performance target? That's my assumption, is a little bit of the difference. I just think of interview questions.
And I think possibly, so skills-based hiring, obviously you have sort of hard technical skills, and you also have soft skills that you're trying to assess for. And I think that performance-based hiring, like I'm thinking of sales, but I guess it's in different jobs as well. You can achieve things, but not necessarily have the soft skills necessary for the X team that you're hiring for. You're not sure how they achieve those things, how they achieve those objectives. I mean, I think you lack a lot of context when somebody's sharing their performance as a candidate. And yeah, I think soft skills, they don't come through in like I achieved 110% of my quota. That doesn't give you a read on soft skills. Whereas I think skills-based hiring, that will come into it, if that makes sense. So we have another question. Would you say that skills-based hiring can be applied to any role? So for example, ICs versus leadership.
So I've had this conversation, and it's not an IC versus leadership, but it is places where you're legally bound for credentials. So in the most extreme, right? Like maybe you're really good with your hands and know a lot about the structure of the heart, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a heart surgeon because you need to have the credential. And
Right.
Maybe that's for the best.
I'm a self-taught heart surgeon.
Exactly. Though I would say, like, if you're doing skills-based hiring, like just because you have a degree for like and you've been a heart surgeon, like what are your medical outcomes? How do your patients feel about you? Like there's a lot of like skills and performance to round that out. So other than those credential pieces, I think you can certainly do skills-based hiring. And I think it's actually even more important, I would argue, for manager roles, where sometimes I feel like management, particularly as a manager, can feel very ephemeral. But if you can do the work as a team to define what management means for your organization and test against that, it'll be much more impactful. But I don't know. Angie, Emily, better answers?
I think I would agree, other than, yes, those credentials, you might need to become a doctor or whatever other industry requires a credential.
Yeah, 100%. I think we see that too, depending on the type of tooling that we use. I think a lot about sales operations or Salesforce knowledge, specific tools that you need to have certification, like Salesforce Lightning. You can have the certification and yet, yeah, exactly, maybe not be as quick on the tool, or maybe have the certification but not the real world experience. So yeah, and still be self-taught. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a boundary. There's a dividing line where we go, okay, this is where we're going to test. This is where we're going to ask questions. This is what we're going to require. We need to see like a certificate for this. Yeah.
I think you can, like almost any role you can apply skills-based hiring to, but it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all thing. I think like specifically for your assessment process or any skills-based test that you're going to build out, that obviously needs to be very closely correlated with the skills for the job you're trying to test for, and that wouldn't be the same for, say, an IC engineer or like engineering management. And I think that like it's not enough to put an assessment in place. That assessment needs to be sort of improved over time, and some thought needs to go into that. And like you were saying, Angie, you kind of learn and have that sort of critical thinking of like, this is the outcome that we're getting. Do we need to tweak some things? But yeah. So I'm gonna have a look at the questions here. Ooh, okay. This one's interesting. They're all interesting, obviously. But do you think that level of education should still impact salaries? So obviously we're talking about degrees and level of education. How does that correlate to
would be
salary?
no.
Yeah, I think my short answer is no. I would say, and I'd be curious if you guys have a better answer than this. We've
Is it
really
no,
struggled as
it
a
shouldn't, or no, it
oh, so
doesn't? Like in today, the
no,
reality
it
today.
shouldn't. But I guess what I was going to share is that we have a really hard time getting good, clean salary data that doesn't necessarily always include degrees, or even years of experience, which I find is really hard, right? Like some people have been in a role for 10 years because they're not advancing in their career. And some people have been in a role in 10 years because they're super skilled, but they don't want to advance. Like, and some people, 10 years doesn't matter. They are doing it at 2 years. And so I think finding like the salary connection is particularly hard, but I definitely, step one is taking the degree level out of the salary band.
It looks like Angie and Emily are nodding in agreement. Okay, we have a question here. Oh, I know we're close to time, so maybe this will be our last question, or maybe second to last. But how about the combination of organizational values and skills-based hiring? Do we think it's best to combine them? I'm not sure what combine them means.
I think there should be a mix of one, like you should identify like what your company values, right? And then again, tie competencies to
Mm,
those values and see if, someone would be a good fit for your organization based
mhm.
on your criteria values that you've established for your organization, plus the skills-based hiring. That's what that question is getting at. I do think there should be a mixture there. Another that I've been kind of researching on is just different ways, different platforms, and different ways of testing skills-based hiring. Not everyone is going to be a really good take-home individual or put on the spot, like code this within the next 30 minutes. So like what we do at Machinify, which I love, is it's very collaborative and conversational. Yes, we are having them either do like a technical challenge, a code, or, some sort of prompt that they're solving for, but it's not like we have our interviewers or our engineers just proxy and watching them. They are meant to be there to understand like engineering thought process. For us, we actually do have a assessment where it's like it's not how fast you can solve the problem. It's like how can you communicate your thought process around how you are solving this problem. And even that, just understanding, is this person coachable? Like maybe they didn't solve the problem fully, but I feel like they are coachable if we put them in the right role.
Yeah, I would echo that 100%. I love how you said that, Angie, tying the competencies back into what those overall company, I guess for its core values, its DNA. And Emnify, we've done that for sure. So like adaptability, that's a big one, right? But then that requires a certain set of skills. Problem solving, that's going to affect our customer in a very specific way. So if we're customer centric, relationship building, how we do it, how we go about it, accountability, effective communication. Yeah, we can break these things down by competencies, plug those into the overall. So yes, I think it's important to weave it all together.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to see if we can squeeze in one last question that just came in. When moving a company towards skills-based hiring, is it better to work gradually across the organization, or big bang, or something else?
I'm a product manager at heart. Gradual. Test and learn, iterate.
We need the guinea pigs first.
Okay.
Get the data.
The willing guinea pigs.
Yes.
The willing guinea pigs.
Willing guinea pigs. That's a fantastic title for the next webinar. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who has joined us today. Thank you to my panelists, Emily, Angie, Amanda. Thank you for being here today. We will try to get to any questions we missed, maybe in a blog article, maybe in an email. We'll try and get you some answers, but thank you so much for being here with us today. And happy hiring. I hope to see you on another CoderPad webinar. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.